Welcome to Exploration Session Summaries. Exploration sessions are offered online as opportunities to speak and listen to each other in a sincere effort to gain understanding about each other's perspectives on a World Conference resolution. A single resolution is the focus of 5 sessions each week. At the conclusion of each session, the breakout groups share a summary of their conversations. This podcast includes all small groups summaries on one resolution. For more information about exploration sessions, go to seaofchrist.org/2023-world-conference.
I'm going to start with the benefits and impact, because as far as personal experience, the only experience we've had, those that have not been in church leadership, is what we have seen the leadership struggle with, as an example, from people trying to get visas to come to conference or trying to keep people safe in situations of great danger. So it's never firsthand, so we can empathize with those in leadership who are struggling with this. Looking at benefits and impact, thinking beyond physical boundaries, we could have memberships anywhere. And the example that came up from several in the group was the Toronto group. And there are people from all over the world that tune into their services. We could have a jurisdiction for young adults. One possibility would be to have a Friends of the Church Association. We could react more quickly as opportunities unfold. There would be flexibility, timelines, quicker input. Forward-looking mindset means we could prepare resources to make this happen, so they would already be in place. We could expedite getting our modern scriptures into hands of people all over the world. We could seek out people gifted in this area. We would provide safe places for people in dangerous situations to congregate. Questions we had: has the number of church closures affected the decision to introduce this resolution? If there is a challenge with having this much authority given to 3 people, could the apostles sign off on decisions? An example of what this could do: what if a prison congregation could be developed? Not having more background information leaves us in a position of blindly offering opinions. We would need to be able to keep confidential identities to groups that would be in danger if their identities were known. And we would like to say that it is exciting to be part of a church that embraces a future somewhat projected by this resolution.
One thing I wanted to mention is that we are aware that the resolution really states who is supposed to be making the decisions, and that it, recommends the First Presidency. So knowing that, we did a lot of talking, like I'm sure everyone else did, about what we think of the resolution itself, the content of it. Experience, we brought a variety of backgrounds with us to our group. One person has been a financial debt counselor, nursing, administration, both within the church and outside the church. And we came from places like an island of the sea, from Michigan, New Mexico. So, kind of wide range of backgrounds that we bring with us. We're all familiar with electronic connections when it comes to gathering together in worship or for meetings. And all of us are familiar with church organization. Several of our participants in our group have had extensive experience in church leadership. So that we brought those kind of things to us. Benefits, and already the previous recorder said most of what we indicated as well. So one, I think, that would add to that, we said it could be a good missionary tool. And it has the option, at least we would hope, that it could create more harmony within the church itself by mixing up, where we were coming from. On the other hand, that can be a challenge too, because it could also create divisions or boundaries, things that would separate us. Questions that we noted would allow for combining like congregational units. So you'd have, maybe 2 congregations would gather on Zoom or on the internet. Would there still be an option to meet in person? What about finances? Where does the financial contribution go? Does it go to where my membership is, or is it going to go if I'm online with a group? Does my contributions go there, or just where does it go? What about our tradition at World Conference of announcing an apostles' jurisdiction? Will that go away if our units are divided up differently? How do we watch that we don't become too siloed? So when you start, gathering together on Zoom according to where your interests are, like we noted earlier, the last recorder said something about, and we did too, we could have armed forces all meet as one unit on a Zoom meeting, or we could have First Nations peoples. And so how can we prevent too much of that siloing? IT was a concern that we had too. How do we maintain security with IT there, and how's it going to be administered? How's it going to work for us to our benefit? We think there's going to be some attention that's going to need to go to that too.
We talked a lot in the personal experience section, though, about our personal experiences, such things as we noted that in our work world, we notice how difficult it is for larger organizations to be responsive quickly to changes that have to happen, or even to communicate quickly when they've made decisions. There is a value in not getting slowed down by processes. That comes again from our work experience. The amendment potentially gives flexibility. That's what our hope is anyway. And then we talked about, some of us have had the experience of the struggle it was from moving from stakes to mission centers. All kinds of emotional dynamics happened during that transition. That was part of our experience. And like the rest of you, Zoom has created closer connections. So the impact and benefits that we could see that maybe haven't been mentioned, it could improve community growth. It could improve our worship experiences, new ways of meeting, new maybe jurisdictional boundaries. We don't really know. This is so open-ended. That's actually that's a question we had. And it would allow us to trust the First Presidency. But the flip side of that is a question. Is it good to put that much power into the First Presidency? Could it be a problem? Does that move us to the top-down leadership model of the LDS Church? Something to think about. Would we lose transparency? Would those decisions be made and then just announced to us? People really like to know and be informed. I think when we're all informed, then we don't have those kinds of issues and questions. It would be important to be inclusive and not show any kind of favoritism as new jurisdictions are formed, whether they're online or geographic or however that is. There needs to be a balance so that it doesn't appear to be favoritism. And we felt too, another challenge is when it is a First Presidency decision, it leaves us feeling like we don't have buy-in to the decision. And so somehow all that has to be worked through. We had some new insights, remembering the struggle it was to move to mission centers, and it would help us be aware of potential conflicts and disagreements and needs to try to be as open and transparent as possible with whatever changes might happen.
Some of our comments were that it would allow us to be more flexible when changes are happening or need to happen. The current mission center structure doesn't work everywhere, especially when areas are spread too far apart. There was a question about, couldn't the change in jurisdiction be done at World Conference rather than having the First Presidency make the decision? And a comment or a question was made about the term additional forms, rather than sticking with mission center form, what those forms might be. Timeliness of getting something done would be, it would help with the timeliness of that, not having to wait for a mission center, for a World Conference, or maybe have to wait for 2 to get it to pass everything. Some of the benefits were allowing for organizational structure that works better for current situations. Again, mentioned the distance of people from each other, an advantage to look at what works best and to have a variety of structures of organizational structure and determine what works best for the different areas. And there was a question raised about if some people might see this as a way to go back to structures they preferred, earlier structures that they might have liked better. That might be how some people are seeing this. And what does the term not currently foreseen or anticipated mean? Getting a better definition of that would be helpful. And some places would be able to identify that there's a problem in the organizational structure, but they may not have a solution, but at least it gets it brought to the table to work on. One of the challenges was the job of figuring out what works. There may be a challenge in a certain jurisdiction. And one of the insights mentioned was hearing about complications in other areas of the world that we may not have been aware of previously.
We really reflected more on the insight of this bylaw change of adding some flexibility to organize jurisdictions a little differently than when we went back quite a few years ago and streamlined our districts and stakes and got things to spot. We reflected a little bit in this organizational thing, talking about Beyond the Walls in Toronto, Canada, where they set up, when they got rid of their old church, built a new church, basically built a studio on there with very little spots. And many of us have benefited from it because as they meet in a very different way there. But it wasn't that different from what lots of people had to do when we shut down for COVID. And so lots of jurisdictions and lots of congregations had to go to Zoom for church. And that opened up some new avenues.
So question 1, what life experiences have informed your perspective on this resolution? Some of us do not have experience with jurisdictions. We wondered, why is this needed? Some have always trusted the leaders to make good choices for us, but now we're listening and can understand why it would be helpful. Earlier in the life of the church, we had districts and then mission centers, and we're not as familiar with the administrative duties at the world church level. Some people have worked for the church. Some were working in other countries where the church was not organized, and those are more emerging settings. And some have also worked in the United States for the church. We mentioned that we valued some apostles' opinions about why this would be a necessary amendment. In some places around the church, you work autonomously, but you also have to be registered or taxed in other countries. And we realize that we need to be able to move more quickly than the world church meets, which is, sometimes every 2 to 3 years or 4 years in this situation. We heard about how the apostolic process is very long and can take 3 to 12 months, but that sometimes it could be very valuable to move quickly. It would just allow the First Presidency another avenue to make a decision. We wonder if we will have online jurisdictions and not just physical boundaries. And we remembered that the national conferences were helpful for different understandings and laws in various countries. Okay, so question 2, what ways could this resolution provide benefit for or impact the community of Christ? And what questions do you have about this amendment? It allows us to be more nimble and responsive. We wondered if the same apostolic process would still apply. We have kind of assumed that the regular process will still be in place, but it allows another quicker option. We talked about how we've reorganized bylaws, but we hadn't already done this. And we wondered why we are adding this amendment. We noted that we thought more people could join the church, especially online communities, quicker, and that there are more non-geographical boundaries now more than ever. Still want to be responsive. We talked about the bureaucratic system established in the 1860s is not conducive to today. I wrote, our new connections across the world via online opportunities were not even conceived when the bylaws were written or revised. Were there any oppressive ways to use it? We wondered about getting guidance and direction from others in charge, and some mission center presidents are volunteers, and sometimes because when you're meeting online, you don't ever meet in person, and so the sense of community is very different if you're meeting online, what that might take away. What is it going to cause? I said, cause them to make a change like this, like an amount of volunteers or money. We have removed a lot of categories of jurisdiction. And in some ways, we haven't been obeying the bylaws with our online ministries. So this would allow for more jurisdiction types. Question of membership. Usually it's your local church, but sometimes you get people from far away. Oh, and we would like to be released from the bounds we've lived under. For example, somebody might be living in Europe, but joining a congregation in the United States. So this would be more open. Question 3, what do you find challenging about this resolution? What new insights have you gained during this session? Sharing with new jurisdictions, what challenges will be involved with creating new worship tools and new communications that maybe are totally different than we're used to. We need to have courage, faith, discernment, and action to share the peace of Jesus Christ, because the church is changing while the world is changing. We need to have an open mind. Challenges might come up when we find new groups that don't work the same way that we're used to. So how will we fit together and work together? We talked about the challenges of not having enough funding to fund the mission. We have to abide by the bylaws because we're a 501c3 organization, and mentioned that it would be nice to keep people informed about the bylaws and keep them involved. We talked about where the amendment came from, that it came from the First Presidency, and that we feel like it is here. It was proposed because there are increasing numbers of congregations that are online only, and they don't fit, or other groups that don't fit the old mold. And it would be great to be able to react quicker, especially in other countries. And we noted, how will these new jurisdictions be recognized, and who will they be responsible to legally, financially, and leadership wise?
A quick view of the bylaws points out that we have congregations, mission centers, and fields, and no other form of jurisdiction. And so this very much has a place to say, yes, if we need some other definition of church, we don't have that space in our bylaws right now.